"Sir, my baby sister is freezing," little boy said. The CEO wrapped him in his coat and took home. The snow had been falling for hours. Thick, heavy flakes covered the empty park like a white blanket, muffling every sound. Wind howled through the bare branches above. Christmas lights blinked across the street, warm and distant, like another world. On a bench beneath a broken street lamp, a little boy sat completely still. His name was Caleb, 4 years old. He was bundled in a jacket 2 sizes too small, his legs pulled up tight, trying to keep warm. In his arms, wrapped in a thin blanket with one fraying edge, was a baby girl, his baby sister, Ellie. Her face was flushed, tiny nose red, lips slightly blue. Her eyelids fluttered as she whimpered softly against his chest. "Shush," Caleb whispered, rocking her gently. His voice was from the cold. "Don't cry, Ellie. Big brother's here." She let out another tiny, broken sob. Caleb leaned closer, trying to shield her from the wind. His fingers, red and raw, trembled as he pulled the blanket tighter around her. The snow didn't stop. It gathered in his dark hair, melted slowly down his cheeks. "Mommy's going to come back soon," he murmured as if repeating something he had told himself over and over. "She promised. She just went to get something. She said to stay right here." He looked up. No one. The park was empty, just shadows and snow and silence. He looked down at Ellie again. Her eyes weren't really opening anymore. Her lips trembled. "Please don't get colder," he whispered. "You got to be brave, okay?" Like Mommy said. He looked around again. "Somebody," he called weakly, his voice cracked. "Please." Nothing. Then footsteps, slow, steady, crunching through the snow. Caleb's body stiffened. He clutched Ellie tighter. A man came into view under the dim streetlight. Tall, dressed in a dark coat, expensive shoes nearly buried in slush. He paused when he saw them. 2 small shapes huddled together on the bench, barely visible under a thin layer of snow. The man approached slowly. "Hey," he said. His voice was low, unsure. "Are you all right?" Caleb didn't answer. He blinked up at the man with wide, tired eyes. The man crouched, lowering himself to their level. His gaze fell on Ellie's pale face. "God," he whispered. "How long have you been out here?" Caleb swallowed, his lips barely moved. "Sir, my baby sister is freezing," he said softly. "Can you help us?" The man stared at him for a second, long enough to see the boy's shaking arms, the baby's shallow breaths, the snow clinging to the thin blanket. Then, without a word, he pulled off his thick wool coat and wrapped it tightly around both children. He folded it over twice, pressing it gently around Ellie's tiny body. "I've got you," he murmured. "Hold on." He lifted the baby first, her weight barely more than a bag of flour. Then, he lifted Caleb, who didn't resist. He just kept holding on to his sister like his life depended on it. "What's your name?" the man asked as he carried them toward the black car parked nearby. "Caleb," the boy said. "And hers, Ellie." "I'm Grayson," the man said. "Grayson Hale." He opened the car door, eased them inside, turned the heat up to full. Caleb was shivering now, but he didn't cry. He just looked down at Ellie, making sure the coat stayed around her. "She's really little," he said quietly. "Mommy said I have to keep her warm." Grayson turned around from the front seat, looking at them. 2 little strangers frozen and silent in the dark. "You did good, Caleb," he said. "You kept her safe." Caleb didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the window, scanning the falling snow. "Mommy's still out there," he whispered. Grayson started the engine. The heater roared softly. Warm air began to fill the cabin. "You're safe now," he said. Caleb looked up at him, confused, hopeful, but still holding Ellie close. "Is it okay if we stay with you? Just for a little bit?" he asked. Grayson met his eyes in the mirror. Something shifted in his face. "Yes," he said. The car pulled away from the park bench. Snow kept falling. Caleb leaned his forehead gently to Ellie's. "I told you, Ellie," he whispered. "Big brother's here." Grayson pulled into his circular driveway just after midnight. Snow clung to the trees as the iron gates slowly closed behind them, muffling the wind. The house stood tall under the porch lights, pristine, silent, more like a museum than a home. Inside, warmth greeted their frozen skin. Caleb let out a quiet sigh, still cradling Ellie beneath Grayson's thick coat. Grayson didn't say a word. He carried them up the wide staircase into a guest room that hadn't been used in months. The sheets were clean, untouched. He laid Ellie gently on the bed, her tiny face pale and still. Then he knelt beside Caleb to remove his soaked socks and shoes. The boy's small toes were red with cold. Caleb blinked at the high ceiling and polished floors. Is this a hotel? He asked softly. Grayson offered a faint smile. No, just my house. Caleb nodded, still holding Ellie close. Whether the answer comforted him or not, Grayson couldn't tell. He picked up his phone immediately. I have 2 children here, he told his physician. One's about 4, the other just a baby. Cold exposure. I need you here now. As he waited, he paced, checked Ellie, checked Caleb. Their stillness made his chest tighten. He found a thick blanket in the closet and wrapped it around both of them. Then he sat on the edge of the bed. Without a word, Caleb leaned against him, resting his head on Grayson's arm. Grayson froze, unsure what to do. He hadn't touched anyone with this kind of closeness in years. But he didn't move away. He let the boy stay. 20 minutes later, the doctor arrived. Calm, quick, he examined Ellie, then Caleb. No frostbite, he said, but definitely early hypothermia. They're lucky. Grayson stood by the door afterward, watching the children now tucked safely under layers of blankets, slowly relaxing into sleep. Then Ellie whimpered, a thin cry. Grayson rushed to the bed, unsure. She's hungry, Caleb murmured. Grayson asked, do you know what she drinks? Formula. Mommy always makes a bottle before bed. Grayson nodded and hurried to the kitchen. The sleek surfaces felt colder than the snow outside. He tore through cabinets until he found a forgotten donation box, baby formula, bottles, instructions. He boiled water, let it cool, spilled some. The bottle was too hot. He hissed in frustration. A quiet voice from behind startled him. You have to warm the milk first. Grayson turned. Caleb stood there wrapped in a blanket. Not too hot, the boy added. Cold milk makes her tummy hurt. Grayson nodded. Right, not too hot. He followed Caleb's instructions carefully. When the bottle was ready, he handed it to him. Caleb tested the warmth on his wrist like a pro. She'll drink that, he said. Can I feed her? Upstairs, Grayson sat nearby while Caleb held Ellie, guiding the bottle to her mouth. Her hands gripped his finger as she drank, eyelids fluttering. Caleb whispered softly, it's okay, Ellie. I'm here. When she finished, Grayson gently lifted her and placed her into the crib that had been assembled just hours earlier. He covered her with the softest blanket he could find. Then he did something unexpected. He hummed. It wasn't a song he knew, just a low, warm sound from deep in his chest. Ellie's breath evened out, her face calm. From the bed, Caleb whispered, you have a nice voice. Grayson gave a soft laugh. Thanks. He stayed by the crib, watching Ellie breathe, then turned to see Caleb. Already falling asleep, curled beneath the blanket, his small body finally at rest. The house was quiet, but for the first time, it didn't feel empty. Grayson didn't sleep that night. Not because he couldn't, because something inside him had changed, and he didn't want to stop watching over them. The next morning, the house was quiet. Sunlight poured softly through the tall windows of Grayson's home, glinting off polished countertops and untouched marble floors. In the kitchen, the scent of freshly brewed coffee floated in the air as Grayson stood at the counter, still in his robe, stirring his cup slowly. Soft footsteps tapped down the hallway. Caleb peeked around the corner. He was in his tiny socks, dragging the oversized pajama pants Grayson had found for him the night before. He walked in quietly and climbed onto one of the bar stools. Grayson looked over and offered a gentle smile. Morning, buddy. Caleb didn't smile back, his hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, Mr. Grayson, do you think Mommy is still looking for us? Grayson turned fully toward him, the warmth in his eyes softening even more. I don't think, he said. I know she is, and we're going to find her. Caleb's shoulders dropped just a little, a flicker of relief crossing his face. He sat quietly for a moment, then spoke again. Her name's Laya. My mommy. She works at a place called Bluebird Cafe. He nodded more to himself than anyone. She bakes cookies, chocolate chip ones. She said, when I turn 5, she'll make me a birthday cake with stars on it. Grayson crouched beside him now, listening fully. Do you remember anything else about her? He asked softly. Caleb's eyes lit up a little. She has sunshine hair, like yellow and shiny. She sings to Ellie every night. Even when she's really tired, she sings. Grayson paused, absorbing every word. Do you remember where the cafe is? Caleb frowned. No, but it has a bell on the door. It always rings when she walks in. I wait for her at the window sometimes after preschool. I know it's called Bluebird. Grayson nodded. That's a start. That's a really good start. Caleb looked down. Is that enough? Grayson stood and ruffled the boy's hair. Let's find out. He grabbed his laptop from the living room and set it on the kitchen island. Caleb scooted closer, watching as Grayson typed Bluebird Cafe into the search bar. Dozens of results came up, some local, some out of state. Grayson refined the search, narrowing it to within the city limits. I'll check each one, he said. He opened a map and began marking every cafe that matched or came close. Bluebird Cafe, Bluebird Bake House, the Bluebird Nest. Caleb leaned his chin on his hand, watching silently. We'll start near the central bus station. Grayson said more to himself, pointing on the screen. The plan was forming in Grayson's mind. It was still Christmas weekend. Roads were packed. Some cafes might be closed, but some might not. Either way, he wasn't going to let it go. Snow kept falling steadily over the city, blanketing rooftops, street lights, and sidewalks in thick layers of white. The car's windshield wipers scraped rhythmically, clearing the frost as Grayson drove slowly through slushy roads. Beside him sat Caleb, bundled in a thick coat, his arms wrapped protectively around Ellie, who was nestled in a blanket. Her tiny eyes blinked sleepily, unaware of the journey unfolding around her. They had already passed 3 cafes. None of them felt right. Grayson pulled up to the next one, the Bluebird's Nest. Caleb glanced out the window, studying the entrance carefully. Then, with quiet certainty, he shook his head. This isn't the one, he whispered. Mommy's cafe has a bell on the door. It always rings when she walks in. Grayson made a note. That detail might seem small, but to him it was gold. As they moved on to the next location, Caleb suddenly spoke again. His voice was hesitant, as if he wasn't sure he should share it. Mommy told us we were going to Grandma's house. She was carrying lots of bags. At the bus station, someone knocked her down and then I couldn't see her anymore. Grayson slowed the car. There was a long silence between them. The pieces fell into place in his mind. The crowd, the chaos. Laya hadn't abandoned her children. She'd lost them in the most terrifying way imaginable. He said nothing, just reached over and gently placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. The boy looked out the window again, his little fingers tightening around Ellie. They continued searching, but something had shifted. The tension inside the car became heavier. Caleb grew quieter. He refused to get out, even when Grayson offered to carry Ellie inside to keep her warm. When Grayson reached for her, Caleb blocked him, eyes wide. No, he said firmly. I promised Mommy I'd protect her. I didn't keep her safe last time. Grayson's breath caught. The pain in the boy's voice wasn't just fear. It was guilt, misplaced, but heavy. A child carrying a weight far too big for his small shoulders. You did your best, Caleb, Grayson said softly. You're doing so good. Still, Caleb clung to Ellie like she was all he had left. By late afternoon, they had nearly exhausted the list. The snow was falling harder now, and the sky was turning steel gray. Grayson sighed, steering the car down a narrow street near the old bus terminal. Maybe we'll try again tomorrow, he murmured. And then, sir, that's my mom. That's my mom. Caleb pressed his hands and face to the cold window, his breath fogging up the glass. Grayson hit the brakes. You're sure? He asked. Caleb nodded so hard it looked like his head might fall off. That's her, Mommy. I see her. Grayson turned his gaze toward the sidewalk. And there, under a flickering street lamp, stood a woman. Her coat was thin. Her hair, golden and slightly messy, was tied in a loose bun. She moved from one telephone pole to another, her gloved hands shaking as she tried to tape a worn, crumpled flyer. Even through the misty glass, Grayson could see the photo. 2 children. She was crying, though trying to stay composed. Her eyes scanned every passer-by with frantic hope. Heartache carved into every line of her face. Grayson couldn't breathe. Beside him, Ellie stirred and let out a soft sound. Then came a babble, gentle and broken. "Mama." Grayson turned to Caleb. "Do you want to go to her?" Caleb looked up, tears already welling. "Can we?" Grayson opened the door. He scooped Ellie into his arms, careful not to jostle her, and followed behind as Caleb ran ahead through the snow. "Mommy!" the boy shouted. The woman froze. Her body went stiff, then turned slowly, almost afraid to believe what she'd heard. Her eyes locked on the little boy barreling toward her. She dropped the flyer. It fluttered away in the wind as she fell to her knees. "Caleb!" she cried out, catching him as he leapt into her arms. Tears poured down her face. "My baby, oh my God!" My baby. Grayson stepped closer. Ellie nestled against his chest. The woman looked up, gasping when she saw her daughter safe and sleeping. Grayson gently passed Ellie into her trembling arms. Laya sobbed, cradling both children as if afraid they might vanish. Thank you, she said through the tears. Thank you, thank you. She kissed their heads, whispering prayers and apologies. Then slowly she raised her head. Her eyes ocean blue, glassy with emotion, met Grayson's. They said nothing. They didn't need to. There was recognition there, relief and something deeper. Grayson offered a quiet smile. They're strong, he said, just like their mother. Snow fell gently around them as Laya held her children close, her entire world restored in a single breathtaking moment. Grayson stood a few feet away, heart fuller than he'd ever known. And for the first time in years, his eyes softened completely. A family, scattered, broken, was starting to come back together. Snow was still falling hard when they got back to Grayson's house. The wind howled around the car as he opened the front door and guided them in. Caleb half asleep in his arms. Laya holding Ellie tightly to her chest. Her eyes were red from crying, her body stiff from the cold, but her grip on her children never wavered. You're welcome to stay, Grayson said quietly. At least until the storm passes. Laya hesitated in the hallway, glancing down at Caleb, then back at Ellie. Both children were already dozing off, safe, warm. She looked at Grayson. His coat was soaked, his hair disheveled, but his eyes steady. Kind, she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. That night, they tucked Caleb into the guest room bed. Ellie was placed gently in her crib nearby. Grayson stayed until both were asleep, then silently stepped back into the hallway with Laya. You've done a lot for us, she said. Grayson shook his head. I just did what anyone should. She gave a small, tired smile. Not everyone would have stopped. The next evening, they shared their first meal together. It was awkward at first. The kitchen table, usually set for one, now held 4 mismatched plates, plastic cups, and bowls of steaming chicken soup. Grayson cleared his throat, glancing around. I'm not much of a cook, he admitted. But it's edible, I think. Laya picked up her spoon. It smells good. Caleb, sitting between them, leaned close to his mother and whispered with a sleepy grin. Mommy, Mr. Grayson can cook soup like you. He made chicken soup when you were gone. Laya looked over at Grayson. Surprised, he gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. She laughed softly, not out of politeness, but something warmer. Real then, I guess you did more than just keep them warm. Grayson's chest ached with something he didn't know how to name. That night, Ellie began to fuss. By midnight, she was running a slight fever. Laya rushed to her side, trying to soothe her, but the baby whimpered restlessly in her arms. Panic flickered in Laya's eyes. Grayson entered the room quietly, a cool, damp cloth in hand. He knelt beside her, offering it without a word. She took it, her hands trembling. I haven't slept in days, she murmured. And she never gets sick. Grayson reached out, his hand gently covering hers as she pressed the cloth to Ellie's forehead. You're not alone anymore, he said. Laya blinked at him, her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes shimmered. She looked down at Ellie, then back at him, and gave the faintest nod. Together. They sat by the crib, watching over her. Laya began to hum, a soft lullaby, almost a whisper. Ellie's breathing slowed, her tiny hand opened. Grayson leaned back and closed his eyes. He'd never heard anything so calming. Later that night, Caleb called softly from the other room. Grayson went to him. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Caleb shook his head. I was thinking about Daddy. Grayson sat on the edge of the bed. He was strong, Caleb said. He used to lift me up to see the stars. Grayson listened, then tucked the blanket around him. Your daddy would be proud of you, he said. Caleb looked up. Can I still hug you even if you're not my daddy? Grayson didn't hesitate. He opened his arms. Caleb climbed into them and hugged him tight. It was late when Laya walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. She paused in the doorway. Grayson had fallen asleep on the couch, head tilted to the side, arms curled protectively around Ellie, who was now sleeping peacefully on his chest. The fire had gone low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the room. Laya didn't say anything. She just stood there watching them. Her grip on the glass loosened slightly. Her shoulders dropped. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't holding everything on her own. And that realization made her eyes blur with quiet tears she didn't wipe away. Not this time. The snow had finally softened, blanketing the front yard in quiet white. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm stillness. Early in the morning, while Caleb and Ellie still slept, Grayson handed Leia a spare pair of gloves and a shovel. "Want to help me dig us out?" he asked with a small smile. Leela chuckled. "Only if you promise not to laugh when I fall." They stepped outside together, side by side, working in slow rhythm under the pale winter light. Their breath clouded in the air, shovels scraping gently along the walkway. It was the first time they'd been alone. "Was it hard?" Grayson asked after a while. "Raising them on your own?" Ya kept her eyes on the snow. "Yes," she whispered, "but not the way people think. I lost my husband in a car accident when I was 6 months pregnant with Ellie. Caleb was just learning to walk. I didn't have time to fall apart. I worked. I hoped they'd be okay." Grayson glanced over at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. "I stopped dreaming," she continued. "No painting, no baking, just survival." He nodded slowly. "I get that. I grew up without parents, bounced around foster homes. I thought building something big would make me feel whole." "Did it?" she asked. "No," he said quietly. "Turns out it's not things that matter, it's people." That afternoon, while helping Grayson sort through old storage, Leia opened a door at the end of the hall. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. The room was empty except for a dusty stool and a forgotten easel in the corner. "This was supposed to be an art room," Grayson said. "But I never used it." Leia stepped inside, touched the sill. "It's beautiful," Grayson hesitated. Maybe it was waiting for someone else. The next morning, she returned and froze. A set of watercolor paints sat on the desk. Fresh brushes, clean paper. A warm lamp glowed softly in the corner. On the table, a note read, "I hope you'll never stop dreaming again." Gee, her eyes filled with tears. That weekend, Grayson took them to a cozy photo studio. Leia, Caleb, and Ellie wore matching red sweaters. Grayson stood awkwardly at first, unsure where to go until Caleb tugged his hand. "You go here," the boy said, pulling him beside them. In the photo, Caleb stood in the middle, holding both their hands. Ellie sat giggling in Wila's lap. "Now we all match," Caleb grinned. That night, after the kids were asleep, Grayson framed the picture and placed it above the fireplace, replacing a cold, abstract painting with something warm, something real. On New Year's Eve, they curled up together in the living room. The fire crackled in the hearth. Leia leaned beside Grayson, their legs almost touching. The kids played quietly nearby. At midnight, fireworks lit the sky. Colors flared across the windows. "I never thought I'd find home again," Leia whispered. Grayson looked at her. "Maybe home finds you." She smiled. "Just a little, but enough." Later that night, long after the fireworks faded, the four of them stayed right there in the living room. Ellie lay curled on Yayla's chest, warm and still. Caleb rested his head on Grayson's leg, one hand gripping his sweater. Grayson, eyes heavy, reached across the couch. His fingers found Leia's hand. She didn't pull away, and in that moment, there were no promises, no explanations, just quiet understanding. A man who had lived behind walls, a woman who had lost her light, two children who needed more than shelter. They weren't a traditional family, but they were becoming something else, something stronger, something true. Leia stood by the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching snow fall onto the front lawn. Days had passed since the reunion, and while warmth filled every corner of Grayson's home, something inside her remained unsettled. When Grayson entered the room, she turned. "I think it's time we go," she said softly. "We've stayed too long. I have a friend near Millfield. It's not much, but she said we could stay a while." Grayson nodded once. "Of course, whatever you need." She waited, hoping for more, but he stayed silent, his expression careful, unreadable. The quiet stung worse than any goodbye. She left without another word, and Grayson stood alone, staring at the space she'd left behind. That night, long after the kids were in bed, Grayson sat beneath the Christmas tree. The lights twinkled softly. In his hands was the photo they'd taken together. Caleb's wide smile, Ellie clutching his sweater, Leia's gentle eyes. It looked like a family. Footsteps padded in behind him. Caleb, still in pajamas, held something folded in his small hands. He climbed onto the couch and sat beside Grayson without a word. "I drew this," he whispered, offering the paper. Grayson opened it. Crayon lines formed four figures beneath a crooked roof, hearts in the windows. A house, a family. Caleb leaned closer. "I know you're not my daddy, but I love you like one." Grayson's throat tightened. The drawing blurred in his vision. For the first time in years, tears escaped down his cheeks. He reached out and pulled Caleb into a hug, holding him close. No words, just truth. The next morning, the house was quiet. Laya packed slowly, folding the few belongings she had brought. On her way past the art room, something new caught her eye. Just outside the door sat a box of watercolor paints, a pad of thick paper and a small card with simple, familiar handwriting. "I hope you'll never stop dreaming again. Gee." She froze, hand-brushing the top of the box. It wasn't sadness that filled her. It was something softer, something she'd forgotten how to name. She turned and Grayson was there, standing silently in the hallway, hands in his pockets, eyes steady, but open. He didn't ask her to stay. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. She clutched the card to her chest and walked on. Outside, Laya buckled Ellie into her car seat while Caleb climbed in beside her. Snow drifted lazily down, covering the road in thin white. Grayson stood at the doorway, watching from afar. As Laya turned the key, Caleb's voice broke the silence. "Why can't we stay here, Mommy? We're a family now, right?" Her hands froze on the wheel. She looked into the rearview mirror and saw her son's eyes so full of trust, of hope, of certainty. She looked back at the house, at the man who had once been a stranger in a snowstorm. The engine shut off. Snow crunched under her boots as she stepped out, holding Ellie. Caleb trailing close. Grayson turned at the sound. Laya met his eyes. "Is the offer still open?" His face didn't show surprise, only something deeper. Relief, maybe even joy. That night, as the clock struck midnight and fireworks painted the sky, the four of them sat on the couch together. Ellie slept on Grayson's chest, Caleb curled against Laya, eyes heavy. "Can we live here forever?" Caleb asked, looking up. Grayson glanced at Laya. She met his gaze and nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Yes, forever sounds just right." Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, love had settled in quietly, completely, and for good. The house no longer echoed with silence. It had been a year since that snow-covered Christmas Eve. Now laughter bounced off the warm walls. Tiny socks lay forgotten on the stairs. A half-finished snow angel drawing clung to the fridge. The living room smelled of cinnamon and pine. Soft jazz playing in the background. In the kitchen, Laya stood at the counter, hands dusted with flour, her golden hair in a loose bun. Caleb stood beside her on a stool, carefully cutting gingerbread stars. "Like this, Mommy?" he asked. "Perfect," Laya said, kissing his temple. Across the room, Ellie toddled on wobbly legs, giggling as she clutched a stuffed penguin. Her curls bounced as she headed toward the tree where Grayson knelt, hanging ornaments. He smiled and lifted her high. "Look, Miss Ellie," he said, pointing. "Caleb made that star, remember? It was crooked, made from yellow paper and glue, but it gleamed brighter than gold in their eyes." Laya glanced over and caught Grayson's eye. He smiled. She smiled back. No grand wedding had happened. No crowd, no photos. Just one morning, a simple gold ring with a blue stone appeared on Laya's finger. She'd said yes, not with words, but in how she stayed. There was no need for fanfare. They had something better. Love, quiet, steady, and real. Later, while the kids napped, Laya stepped into the small sunlit room at the end of the hall, her studio now. Once empty, it was now filled with brushes, canvas, and warmth. On the wall hung a framed article from the local paper about her art exhibit. Grayson had quietly submitted her paintings to a charity auction. A children's book editor had seen them and reached out. Now, she was illustrating a picture book called The Little Boy in the Winter He Lost His Mother. She smiled at the open page on her desk. Caleb's curious eyes, Ellie's tiny hat, a tall man with kind eyes and a coat too big for the two children he carried through the snow from the hallway. Caleb's voice called out, "Mommy, Ellie's up." And Daddy said, "We can open one present." She laughed, "All right, let's go." Back in the living room, the four of them sat beneath the glowing tree. Caleb reached for a red gift with silver stars. The tag had his name written in Grayson's neat handwriting. Inside was a canvas. He gasped when he saw it. A painting done by Laya of the four of them holding hands in falling snow. Caleb stood in the middle, Ellie on Grayson's shoulders, Laya's arm around them all. Caleb looked at it wide-eyed. "This is us." Grayson nodded. "This is what Christmas should feel like always." That night, as snow began falling outside again, they curled together on the couch. Ellie lay asleep on Lila's chest. Caleb nestled between them, eyelids heavy. Grayson draped a blanket over them all as the fire crackled softly. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. If this were a movie, the camera would pull back now through the window where snowflakes danced in the dark. Outside was cold, but inside warmth lived in every corner. It wasn't a perfect home, but it was whole. Not built on blood, but on love, trust, and the courage to stay somewhere deep inside that little house, tucked between laughter and healing. Lived a quiet miracle, a second chance. And sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into, it's the one we build. Thank you for watching this emotional journey of love, hope, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the hype button and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more real-life inspired tales that heal and uplift. From quiet acts of kindness to the strength of found families, we share stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Keep believing in love, in goodness, and in the quiet miracles of everyday life. This is Soul-Stirring Stories. Thank you for being part of our community. See you in the next story.